Hi, I'm Suzanne Ehlers, and this is Not Really Strangers, the podcast where we explore just how connected the refugee experience is to our everyday lives and to the social issues that matter most to us. Thanks for joining us for another conversation with a brand new guest, here to share the story of how they came to realize that their story and the refugee story were intertwined. By the end of this episode, you'll see that in this global community, the distance between us is often much shorter than we think. Let's dive in. Let me kick off and Lien, welcome you and thank you so much for making time for Not Really Strangers. I'm going to share a little bit about what I know about you and why we know each other, but then I hope you'll do so as well. In the throes of COVID, as a woman on the East Coast of the United States in her late 40s who loves good food and going out, began to scroll Instagram and found you and found like two of the most beautiful restaurant sort of scenes that I could ever imagine, including what you built at All Day Baby LA. And I became like this fangirl from Washington, D.C. And I loved your text and your prose. I loved your photos. I loved your playfulness. Like it just all, if I lived in your neighborhoods, I would have gone to your restaurants every night. And so once COVID had cleared, you know this, that I came out and was able to dine with my family, my husband and two daughters, and then with one of my best friends at your more kind of cafe style place. And just first of all, I met you at the podium when I walked into the restaurant and almost like erupted into tears. And you were so generous because here's this like strange lady coming in saying that I only know you from social media, but that I have like believed and loved you for so long in what you were trying to create in your community. So that's why we're here today, is just because you have put out such incredible, generous, and really motivating energy to the world. And I got to taste it and have tried to build a friendship with you over the last few years and in a conversation with you today about the work that I do.
Suzanne, you honor me. That is just so kind. And I'll never forget that day that I met you and your family. I'm just so glad I was there, but that's always where I am. I'm always standing right there at my host stand. So thank you so much for having me on your program.
Yeah. So I think you know that in this podcast, Not Really Strangers, we're exploring like all sorts of notion of home and identity and what does it mean to be a stranger. And so we're just going to go through a couple of questions, and I would love just to hear, sort of your thoughtful response and how it works into kind of the food scene that you have long worked in and been a leader in, but so many other creative endeavors that you have. And we don't know each other all that well, so I know that I'm going to learn a lot about you today. But we're going to start with some of the basics, like where you're dialing in from and where you call home. Maybe it's the same place, maybe it's not, but I would love to just hear both of those pieces.
Sure. I am dialing in from my one-bedroom rental apartment in Silver Lake, Los Angeles. So it's just it's a small little neighborhood section off Sunset Boulevard. I would say like southeast of Hollywood. And I would say I call this place my home. I've lived in Los Angeles for 22 years, and the rumors about LA are quite true, which is that it can be sometimes a bit isolating and strange to live in Los Angeles. And it took time for me to find a sense of place. I felt like, I think I left college thinking I was going to move to New York and work in magazines, and instead followed a boy who wanted to pursue acting, and we moved to LA. And it's difficult to make friends. It can be hard to meet people. But over time that changed. And then this space in particular where I live, I have to say I moved here almost 3 years ago, and I lived in all over LA. But this is my first time in my whole life, like starting from infancy to now, that I have felt that sense of home. It's all the things that I didn't know I needed. And it was also a weird time in my life where I had to really identify what my needs were. And this place has a lot of sunlight. It's really quiet. Mm-hmm. I'm surrounded by greens. I know how to care for plants now. Mm-hmm. It's my sanctuary. So I love this place. I won't always be here forever, so I'm really cherishing my time.
Yeah, yeah. When I last saw you at one of your restaurants, I was with two of my girlfriends, one who I'd grown up with in Texas, who lives in LA, and the other who also lives in LA, but who I had met first in college on the East Coast. And I watched the three of you connect about that sense of home in LA and kind of what an uphill kind of climb and battle it can be in ways, and how you each, I don't know, just sort of really quickly share just sort of like neighborhoods and little pockets that had meant something to you. And you mentioned Silver Lake then. So beautiful reflection. And because we're on this topic of home, what does sort of home mean to you? You just sort of said a couple of things, the sunlight, the plants, the greenery, but what else is it about the concept of home that resonates with you?
Well, when I think about, a lot of times a great icebreaker between anybody is to talk about where you're from. And I often will describe my first sentence response to that would be, I grew up in Atlanta. So, and I think I like that response because I moved there when at the age of 13. I lived there 13 to 17. So I finished elementary school, did middle school and did high school there. And I think there's such formative years to develop socially and to almost, for me, it was to see what a sense of home was for my peers. And I have to say, I don't think I grew up with a great sense of home or even definition of home. I think I saw an idea of what I would want or desire, whether it's like my best friend's home and the fact that she had this like entire large basement to call like her space. She had a desk and a huge bedroom and her own bathroom, and it was so beautifully decorated. And I was like, this is what I would always want, And I remember watching a sitcom growing up called Out of This World, and a girl that she had like these magical powers, and she had this really cool, modernly decorated bedroom, and she would touch her fingertips together and like freeze time. Like, to me, that, was such a great sense of home. And then what I'm seeing now, which is so amazing, but like over 20 years ago, I watched the Gilmore Girls, and watching Lorelai and Rory grow up, I was like, that's a sense of home. So I didn't really have that, but I had a sense of what I desired from home. And what I've learned over time is, you have to build it. And what I have now is I love the space of rest. I love that I get to come home and recharge. And the first thing that I do when I wake up is I think about, my accomplishments from the day before, how I want to improve, what I enjoyed, what disappointed me. But a home is where it is like the free space. Well, maybe you pay rent or a mortgage, but it is your space to define and really get to know yourself.
Mm-hmm. I love, you've made me think of this book that was always around growing up that sort of showed creative kids' bedrooms. And I was in San Antonio, Texas, and I remember this one sort of photo spread of this girl who had an apartment in New York City, which of course felt like so foreign to me and so far away. And I remember like obsessing over that room, like imagining what I would be like in that space, imagining what it would have, like to have a desk all of yours and a bunk bed situation and sort of this beautiful like rug and sort of relax area for her and her friends. So like you, I also was sort of admiring from afar, and then got to a point where you can build that. You can create those sort of spaces for yourself and for your friends or teenage daughters who have taken over this terrace area that I've built out. And it's like my terrace, but during the day when the UV is good, it's like where they are. So also this notion of kind of sharing what you've built. And I get such satisfaction. And I know you do because I've watched you host people, like of people coming into a space you've created and feeling at home and safe in that space. It's such a beautiful sense of like generosity and gratification.
It really is. I suppose now hearing, what you have to share, it's like, I think I just lacked that sense of belonging. And I think with my restaurants, I really wanted folks to feel that they belonged there and they made a great choice, however far distance they traveled to dine there. And it's a place of comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that word belonging. We might revisit that in our questions. Let me move into something that's a little more specific to the mission and the work of my organization. You know that we're the U.S. national partner to the UN Refugee Agency, and you are the daughter of Vietnamese refugees. And I would love to hear sort of any or part of that story, if you're comfortable sharing it, and what you know about your own family's journey.
Yes, thank you for asking. My parents met in Saigon, which is now called Ho Chi Minh City, the epicenter of southern Vietnam. And my father actually had a whole other family. I think he was on his second wife, maybe at the time, and had like a couple of sons with her. And again, this is only what I know from my mom. My father passed away at age 13 in Georgia. While we were living in Georgia. He actually passed away here in California. But I didn't have an opportunity to really ask him what that journey was like. Last year, my mom and I had a more in-depth conversation about even the exact day that they left Vietnam and arrived in Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, or if it was Kansas. I never remember if it was Kansas or Missouri, because I also had an aunt that ended up going to Missouri. So after the fall of Saigon, which was on April 30th of 1975, about 2-3 years later, my father had hatched a plan that he was going to flee the country by boat. And you had to have X amount of money. You had to have some sort of connection. My father has met my mom at this time, and my mom said it was more so like a transactional relationship. Like my mom had just finished schooling. You know, she was in her early 20s. And she also wanted to find better opportunities for her family. She was the eldest of, I think, 5 children, both of her parents living. She was from a smaller river town along the Mekong, and my father was a very successful fish sauce businessman, and he comes from Chinese roots, so he lived in the Chinese district of Vietnam. So anyway, I guess it worked out. They met, by boat. I mean, just imagining it, it's clearly harrowing and quite cinematic. Like there's really no way to put it. But they left on September 15th, 1978, I believe. And it took about a week to get to Thailand, which was, I believe, where they intended to land. Growing up, I do remember them talking about, that week on the boat. And they talked about pirates. They talked about Thai pirates coming to pillage the boats of like whatever kind of treasures that they could find. I think, people died. I think people were sick. But eventually my family, which consisted of my father, one of my father's sons, my mother, and my father's younger sister, and her daughter, Mimi, who lives here in California. So it was 5 of them. And I don't know how many people were on these boats, but I've read that it was upwards of, 3 dozen sometimes on really, really tiny boats. And then they lived in a refugee camp for about 6 months. And something that my mom, I remember her telling me, was like the water conditions. Like the water was like really poor, and she would always explain like, the reason why her arms weren't perfect, so to speak, was because of the water in those refugee camps in Thailand. I don't know much else about the conditions there, but I understand that there was a lot of negotiating about like where they would head to next. So, for example, I remember, I don't know about choices, but there were choices. Some people went to Australia, some people went to France, and according to my parents, if you had the best luck or maybe the best connections, you would go to the States. So that might take the longest time. I always thought that they were in Thailand for a year, but my mom told me last year that they were there for 6 months. And I have this photo over there to my right in a frame. It's a photo of my parents with water in the background, and they're wearing, outfits from the 70s, like really pretty, like bell-bottomed, like pants. But it's like summer, and these were their outfits that they got made to go to America. So these are their coming to America outfits.
Yeah.
The thing is that they got to Kansas in the dead of winter. So they were not properly clothed.
Right.
But they look pretty happy in this particular photo. And at that point, I think my aunt and her daughter, Mimi, they negotiated maybe on different terms. So they left in a different area. So my understanding is that you got sponsored. And I always think of it as nice Christian families that sponsored my parents over to, middle America. I don't know who these people are. I suppose if I did, I would write them a thank you card or maybe even go knock on their door and see them. But I can imagine it was quite a shell shock. I mean, they had never seen snow. I have no idea where they lived. I remember my mom telling me she had a job in a factory screwing toothpaste caps on. And my father, there are these words in Vietnamese that you just use, and it was called like factory, I guess. And most people went to their factory job, if I'm even defining it correctly. And eventually, so my parents they went anywhere. I suppose anywhere they had friends. And I know that my dad had a lot of sort of family adjacent that were Chinese leaning from Hong Kong, living in the Bay Area. So at one point they were either maybe in Bakersfield or the Bay Area, but while in the Bay Area, they had me. So I was born in San Francisco, right outside San Francisco. This was September of 1981. My parents always said that after I was born, their luck began to turn around. But they described, I remember my father saying, he would fish off the side of the Golden Gate Bridge. I remember they said that, they would, secure a whole chicken, but a whole chicken would last them for a week's worth of meals. But eventually, as the way with many Vietnamese refugees, even today, they sort of fell into the beauty business. And my mom got a license to be a cosmetologist. So she cut hair for a while, and she also did nails. Eventually, it just became like a nail business. And I remember one of the first businesses that she opened was in Compton, California, in, I think, 1983. It was one of the ones. I think maybe she had another one before that, but this is the one that's very memorable to me because it was called Annie's Beauty Center, and it was huge. And one half of the salon were Asian women, maybe all Vietnamese or maybe some Chinese, doing nails. And the other half was all African-American women doing hair. And because I have these photos, I hope I have them somewhere, but I have this photo of turning 3 or 4. And the children of the other ladies that worked at the salon, it was like their daughters. So I have these like cute little black girlfriends they bought me beads for my hair, which obviously would not work for my hair, but I really admire, I've always wanted braids, but beads and braids. And I just have this one photo of us blowing out candles, and it's very sweet. But the truth is I hang on to, these handful of memories because I don't have a lot of them. But eventually we made it to Atlanta, Georgia. And we went there, whether this is true or not, but we went there because my father was diagnosed with bone cancer, and they said that the doctors in Atlanta were better. I think that is just something that they told me, and it might be true, but I also think that what I learned and saw was that there was this huge influx of Vietnamese refugees migrating to Atlanta and really creating this huge community there along a street called Buford Highway. And my family opened one of the first beauty supply businesses along that street. And from there, we met what ended up becoming my mom's future partner of 30 years, a man named Sean, who's one of the greatest men of my life. But he's a Cambodian refugee. And he had a jewelry store across the street. And after my father passed away, Sean and my mother became a pair and lived all over the place, doing all kinds of work. But I learned a lot about his background too. He passed away a year ago unexpectedly, so what I know about the refugee story in that world is, I guess the time that my parents left Vietnam, the Vietnamese had became involved in the Cambodian War because the Khmer Rouge had taken over. So then the Vietnamese got involved, and I bet that was a really difficult time probably to live in the country of Vietnam. Sean had left earlier, so he was a pilot in Cambodia in 1975, and he flew, from my understanding, what my mom told me last year, he flew like diplomats, like people in kind of leadership roles, but not necessarily like, fighting the war. But he flew these folks, but at the time that he, was literally fleeing persecution, he gathered as many people as he could on his airplane, and he flew all the way to Thailand. And he too landed in a refugee camp there. But his story is incredibly harrowing. And when my mom told me after Sean's passing what happened, Sean had a few siblings, but he had one remaining sister, but she was captured, and all his other siblings were murdered. And it took many, many years for him to find his sister and her kids. But from my understanding, I think all the children were found. But just, wow. I mean, it just chills down your spine just imagining that. And so thinking about them just like as, individuals trying to make it work in a foreign land, and really seeing all they achieved, it's inspiring, to say the least. And it can make you feel lazy too, because you're like, oh my gosh, everything that you've done, and you've done, for your future, that was probably quite mysterious and unknown at the time.
Yeah, it's really, so many parts of that story. First of all, like, just that you're a California girl through and through. I didn't realize that you were born in California. I'd sort of remembered the Atlanta piece of your story. And I'm also, when we're ever talking about UNHCR's work with our partners and donors, it really is like putting them in the shoes of people who are making these like impossible choices. Like, can you imagine? I think when you were talking a little bit about like the boat and on the water for a week, and that people died during that journey, the conditions were impossible. And you think of now the Darien Gap and people like living in the jungle for sort of days at a time, what people will go through to try to find safety and opportunity on the other side. It really is almost impossible to put yourself in those shoes. And I love I just sort of so appreciate the chance that you had with your mom last year to like learn as much as you could about it. And it matches stories that I've heard from other colleagues who pieces of it will sort of come out, and you begin to kind of connect dots as sort of the child of that person and begin to kind of sense make maybe some of what you witnessed also in your parents in those early years, that given that kind of background, I don't know, can really put you in a deep place of compassion for their experience.
It's very true. And I'm late to that leg of things, that sense of compassion. I think when you're a child, all you can remember is the absence of your parents, or, the lack or the scarcity that, maybe you saw your American friends at school sort of experiencing with their parents, and you don't experience that with your own. But a lot was at play, and my mom was very young, and, and she was incredibly concerned with just our livelihood. So last year was really such a pivotal moment for us. And I think, I don't know if other kids of Vietnamese refugees have been told this, but a lot of the reasons why my parents, I think, have been reticent to tell me some of their stories is, they're deeply afraid of active communism and people going after anyone over here. My mom will say, she knew I studied writing in school, and she's like, don't ever write about this, don't do anything like these, she would point to these sort of, I guess, more liberal leaning Vietnamese newspapers that we would get. And she's like, don't ever get involved in this. And so one time I was starting to take notes, like this was in my 20s, and I was asking her, again, about how she grew up and how she left. And she was like, stop taking notes. And we're like in her kitchen in Florida at the time. So yeah, there's a lot of paranoia, and really seeing even the current political climate, it's hard not to compare or feel like this is some strange like foreshadowing of like a really difficult time that's soon brewing or is brewing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that real, like that sense of insecurity and lack of safety and of vulnerability will stick with you kind of despite the surroundings. That's powerful to have that memory. When you talked about kind of nice white Christian families, my mostly white Christian family helped a Cambodian family resettle in San Antonio.
Wow.
And I had written a story about it. I should find it on LinkedIn and I'll send it to you. And it was through our church, and we partnered with another family. So they actually moved into this like massive renovated garage of this other family, back to sort of these places that we look in on. And I'm like, how do you have a garage with like a fancier couch than our house has? But that's where the family lived. And I remember my mom, who did not work outside the home at the time and was such a like practical doer, like making doctor's appointments and enrolling the kids in school. She was a professional mom, and she just got it. And like through language barriers, the two of them communicated so beautifully together. They made us Christmas ornaments out of like Christmas ribbon, kind of in an origami that my parents still to this day hang on the Christmas tree. It was really like it was just sort of a very important part of my growing up, not knowing that I would work, one day on refugee issues. But Cambodia, kind of like sits close to home. Switching a little bit, sort of thinking about, speaking of writing, actually, a different sort of piece that you wrote in Edible LA, that connection is the value that you cherish most, right? Sort of this notion, and you talked about belonging, we've talked about home, and it's the value that I saw at play in your restaurant, and, getting to know you a little bit more as a person outside even of the restaurant business. What is it about connection that like so motivates you or animates you?
Well, I would have to give a shout out to my amazing therapist of 3 years.
Always. Let's always give shout outs to therapists.
Sarah, I'm not sure where I would be without her. I sort of rolled into her office. This was the summer of 2022. And I think I had been going on some kind of like adrenaline that had been so far emptied before, just with everything I managed through COVID with my businesses. Yeah. I mean, I really was so depleted at the time and incredibly confused about just me as a individual. Like I knew what actions I was capable of taking, and like what sort of lengths I would go to, save my business and my employees and my community. But I actually didn't know what drove me to those decisions. I wasn't quite sure how to take care of myself. I could tell that I was really sort of decaying, even before my own eyes. I think I was really good at masking it for like the general audience and public, but I internally knew I was breaking down. And we discovered really quickly in that office that I didn't know what my values were, because we should be living by our values. And I mean, I couldn't even define it at the time. Like I can see it in other people, but I couldn't see it in me. And I couldn't put words to it. And I'm like, I've learned that it is how I live, as I live through my words. I can, like, communicating is like my gateway to connecting and my gateway to relating. And when I can't do it, I actually feel incredibly handicapped. So in this moment, I had no gateway even to myself. And so she just had this like deck of cards of like words that are maybe values of others. I'm not sure, but I had to put them on the ground, like put some to the side that I felt connected to. And when I felt unsure, because I was struggling and still struggle with a lot of self-doubt, but connection was the one that I knew for sure I valued.
Yeah.
And so the more that I spent time with that word, I've realized that I think it's so important to me because either I lacked it growing up, I didn't have connection really with my parents, or it didn't feel rich enough or deep enough, like, I guess based on like what I wanted and what I desired, and maybe didn't have it with my peers at school. Like, I always kind of felt like an other. I didn't quite like have a group. I didn't like I think people liked me or thought I was nice if they knew my name, but like I didn't know anyone, and no one necessarily wanted to get to know me. I think why I got into restaurants and writing probably is like I've really learned the value of expression, and I think that if I could just push myself to either relate to people around a dinner table, like I had a lot of friends growing up, and their parents would take me in after school, or I would spend the night at their homes, and just to feel like be able to express my gratitude and even just that sense of like, thank you for including me in your home. I pushed myself to connect to them. Like, I pushed myself to ask questions and be curious and notice things like around their home, or, things that they did with their family, and pay attention and really sort of shine a light on those things. And so I think that was just my one way of being able to relate. And I could tell, one, it made others feel good, and it kind of made me feel good. Mm-hmm. So then as time went on, and obviously I wanted to build restaurants, I also wanted to create that. And I think I'm so grateful, and I'm so glad that I've had this experience of being a restaurant owner and sort of being at the helm of a ship, like literally standing at the front door, and being able to shape one's feelings and their sense of belonging and a sense of connection. I think small talk is really hard for a lot of people. I weirdly can thrive on it if I can sense that person has a desire to connect. And most people coming into my funny little restaurants, they found it for a reason. Yeah. So, whether it was just food alone, but I can always find a way to make a connection. Mm-hmm. And, I love the name of this podcast too, because I actually really love strangers. And, and I know that I just went on a trip to Europe, and because I went in with like such a different set of eyes, because I'm not running my restaurants anymore. So in a way, I just have so much more openness and space for other people, because it used to be filled with like hundreds of people a day. So instead, I could see the clarity that I felt on this trip, and my abilities to just meet either the person standing next to me, or, the father and daughter that ran this amazing souvenir store in Athens. And like, every souvenir store probably could look the same if you're not paying attention. But the only one I went into was full of these beautiful bronze figurines of gods and goddesses of Greek mythology. And this man made them all by hand. Like, they were beautiful. We obviously went away with like so many as gifts. And I'm on a tangent, but like the daughter spoke more English, so we were really communicating with her. And she had made some of the items for sale as well. But there was this like whole section of non-bronze things. And clearly, I don't know, I felt some kind of strange intuition that there was someone else involved in this store. So I asked about her mom. And it turned out her mom was a huge part of this store, but she had just passed away 2 years before. Wow. And there was like this photo of her like just taped in the corner. And I don't know, I'm just so glad I asked, because as you know, I've just experienced a lot of grief recently. And I was just so happy to, one, support a small business, two, come away with some beautiful artisan work, but three, just make this like really happy connection, but also through grief. And I hope a memory I'm going to always carry, because I have a little figurine of Athena, but I hope it was a good day for them too, because they felt seen,
Yeah, I mean, you just said what was on my mind earlier when you were thinking about connection, and you used to be in the homes of friends, and and notice things. And I think about the experience maybe of your friend's parents who have this friend over, you're 13 or 15, and you're remarking on, I don't know, the blanket that I have on my couch or the lighting in the living room. Like, not only to feel seen as a hostess and as somebody who is inviting people to the dinner table, but by someone young, a peer of one of my children, and just how, I mean, I've had that experience where several of my daughter's friends are especially, just sort of attuned. And my God, you always set such a nice table. Or every time we walk in here, you guys make us always feel so welcome. Like how it's even more valuable feedback sometimes coming from this sort of unpracticed source, these sort of teens and young people kind of in development. And you started to go there with the story about Greece, but I do want to ask the podcast, Not Really Strangers. So what does stranger mean to you? It sounds like you like strangers. You interact with people that you have capacity now and kind of space in your head and heart to maybe do more of that. Do you have sort of a notion of like, I always think of like the advice you get as a friend, don't talk to strangers. And yet like, I'll talk to a doorknob if I feel like I can find a connection with it. So where is stranger for you in these words that we've explored today?
I mean, a stranger is an opportunity, I think, to explore your own curiosity, to expand what you think you know today into what you might know tomorrow and will know. I feel I'm so lucky that I met lots of strangers every single day. When I think about the isolation that so many people felt during COVID, I didn't have that. Like I'm very blessed with like an abundance of opportunities to meet strangers, and I think for me a metric of success is if I can somehow blur the boundaries just for a moment between me and a stranger, so that they may sort of take that, I guess, feeling or that exercise or lesson and pay it forward to someone else. Because like I said, and many young children go through this, but I think for me it was especially sort of apparent or vulnerable to be the daughter of Vietnamese refugees and to be in a predominantly white and Black school, and to just be so different and to be so like unapproached, to be strangered for longer periods of time. It really made me want to never make other people feel that way. And because I've been this, I mean, I'm still this sometimes. I'll be in certain circumstances where, we're about to enter Leo season. So maybe it's like in my mind, everyone's a Leo and I'm not, so it's just, I can feel othered all the time, because like other people just like have way more wattage than I do, but I'm more interested in balancing the scales. Like, so when I find someone that I might have an ounce more wattage of more than that person, I want to just sort of fill in those crevices and balance it out. Because I know I have something to learn from that person. So I think of it as an opportunity. It's weird, I'm in this, like I said, I'm just in this whole new space of discovery. Yeah. And so I'm back in LA and the land of strangers. And it's like, I know I'm looking really strange to most people because like I really do want to say hi to people at the grocery store and on my walk and like I want to wave to people in my car and they are not having it. So, we have to meet the moment. So it's not going to always be appropriate because like there's been many times like I'm on a plane and somebody wants to engage with me for 5 hours and I'm like, I don't think I have this in me, right. But because I'm in this kind of new and I'm only just beginning, but this new replenished state, I actually am thinking a lot right now about what are some thoughtful ways that I can kind of re-enter society with this new state of mind, I guess. So I learned a lot on my travels. I was at a wedding. I tend to feel a little displaced at weddings too. And I was like, how can I do better? How can I? And, but yeah, like if I just want to find appropriate amounts of connection with people, because it's not always going to be the same with everybody or any time or any place. So
I was thinking, I mean, like, obviously you have restaurants, obviously strangers walk in all the time. Like I hadn't even, and then you said that, I'm like, my God, you were like in a daily exchange with people who you don't know and who have like made, as you said earlier, the active decision to come and be in a space that you've created with food that you have helped conceptualize, with tiki bars and a bar that you have helped, promote and make visible on social media and other channels. Like, what an obvious kind of connection that you were in that space. And what it brought for me is a fundraiser. So I've been in this nonprofit leadership space for, 15 plus years. And people say, I don't know how you can fundraise. Like, that's just not the work that I want to do. And the truth is, it's at the heart of who I am. And I like never think of it as fundraising. I always think of it as like connection and bringing sort of a stranger into my mix. So we hosted something for kind of our sort of local area donors on World Refugee Day on June 20th. I don't know if the event was actually on that day, and I immediately gravitate to the people who are a little bit at the fringe of the room, who are kind of like, should I have come to this? Like, I could be on my couch right now, binge watching something. And I took this in. So like in pulling, like, thank you so much for coming. Like, what was the motivation to be here? And what about the work that we do on behalf of refugees most moves you? Do you have a personal story to share? Like, I like you go into it with like such curiosity and kind of humility about why somebody would choose to spend sort of time in an environment or on an issue that I care so much about. And when you said strangered, I also had never heard that. We think of othering and othered, but I do think that we can create kind of false distance between ourselves. And sort of like thinking about how to pull people into a space of knowing and a space of, sort of shared experience. That was just a beautiful, beautiful answer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so
and I
nice.
think I thank you for sharing a little bit about how you don't feel like your work doesn't feel like work because of obviously the heart that you put into it. And I think probably why you're successful is you're able to develop trust. And I've learned a lot about this concept of trust, and like, I don't know why people would trust me either with just with, dinner and their money and like, and I mean, maybe not necessarily their safety, but, just something I was thinking about when here in LA, 6 months ago, we've been devastated by wildfires. And on Tuesday, I did some volunteer work and was meeting some children that are sort of at summer camp, I guess, in Altadena. And to get to this newly reopened park called Loma Alta, I had to drive through miles of devastation. And I personally had not gone out of respect. I did not want to look like a tourist, through this destruction. And it was really harrowing to see the amount of loss. Back in January, when this happened, just through my restaurant community, no one uses the term Rolodex anymore, but I like to use the term Rolodex.
I know what it means.
In my Rolodex, it is a ample Rolodex. It might not be hundreds and millions of people, but I figured if I have this inclination to want to help anybody that lost their home in the wildfire, I imagine my lovely community of Rolodex restaurant diners might want to help too. And I was so amazed. People donated to me, just a 40-something-year-old lady in her rental apartment. People donated nearly $10,000 to me, trusting that I would put it in the hands of the right people.
Yeah.
And I was so floored by that. And I obviously was not going to disappoint. I mean, I went to great lengths to, and I always do this weird thing where I try to do 2 in 1. It's like I don't know what it is. It's like a sale concept or something. So obviously I wanted to put dollars or give money towards folks who lost their homes, but in one fell swoop, especially because I was so acutely aware of how it was affecting small business owners, because it was just, I mean, it still is this way, but at the time, I mean, none of us were going out, whether it was you literally couldn't, or you were psychologically affected by the tragedy, which 100% makes sense. But I figured I would use that $10,000 and buy gift cards to restaurants and and local food shops. And in some cases, if I knew the family had children, I went to like a local toy store or whatever. And like I bought gift cards, like all online gift cards, emailed them to these people because like the last thing that they needed to do was like answer a million questions from me about like, what kind of gift do you want? I was already imagining, because I went through it with COVID, like that loss, and yes, like all incredible organizations were like developing grants right away, but like that you had to apply for, or like whatever the process that FEMA was. And like, I remember how stressful that was to suddenly like conjure up a bunch of documents and like have the mental space to do this. And so I was really, really touched personally by the generosity of my Rolodex. And then the trust that they had that I would hopefully give it out to the right people. And I think I did. And then there were books. We did a lot of donations to like school kids and their schools that were affected and towards their rebuilding.
Yeah, there's really, I have that experience so often that people just want to be told how to help in sort of easy ways. And again, if you bring forward kind of credibility and trustworthiness, and you've got a track record or even just sort of a set of ideas of what it might look like, and in this instance, kind of based in your own lived experience during COVID, I'm just like, people just step up. They're like, of course I'll help, and I think my mom modeled that. I always say, like, I'll give to anything. If you are fundraising for a cause, a nonprofit, a marathon, whatever, I don't have the money to give you $25,000, but I try to make a $25 give to anybody ever who asks, because you care enough about this thing to not only be doing it, but then to be putting your heart on the line a little bit and going public with it and asking me for my hard-earned dollars to support you. And I just I want to reward that courage. I want people to know that it's worth taking that step, and that there's a whole net of people out there who will answer the call if given the opportunity. I really feel that. There is, I think, are you also associated with the t-shirts that say "to live and dine" in LA?
Yes,
I created
it.
I just ordered many of those for my 4 girlfriends that we travel together, and they know how much I love you and your work. So I have 4 t-shirts sitting in the other room that I'm going to take to Santa Fe later this year when we all meet together for a vacation.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yes, that slogan came to me on a very slow night. Here's looking at you, and I was standing there at the host stand, being like, I need to think of something to help my partner, who's the executive director at the Independent Hospitality Coalition, which is where the t-shirt is sold.
I'm now on that mailing list.
Thank you.
Yep.
And it's that's so kind. And I was thinking, it's just like we all have a role. Like we all can be a part of a thing, and all of our roles are different. Like, I don't have a lot of money necessarily to give, but I am a great guide, and I can like generate the idea, or kind of like do the corralling, and you too. And it's just it is interesting and very powerful about like what all of our small acts can amount to really big change.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, that's a beautiful. So we will make sure we leave all of this in the show notes. So anybody who wants a "to live and dine in LA" t-shirt, it can be yours. Do not fret. I can't believe we've talked. This has been so beautiful. I'm also so conscious of your time and all the things that you have going on. So I'm going to ask one last question, and it's always my favorite question, but when you hear it, you're going to know why it's my most favorite question to ask you, because you know that breaking bread together is a way to go from being strangers to being connected, 2 words that we've already explored. So I have to just host a dream dinner party, maybe in one of your former restaurants, maybe at your apartment in Silver Lake. What would you serve? What would be, I want your uni panna cotta, because that's literally the best thing I've ever put in my mouth. But what would you serve? What would be sort of your spread for that, kind of out of the heavens party?
Oh, there are so many options, and I feel like I can see the different templates of what the spread could look like. I think if people were to gamble, if this question was a gambling question and people would try to guess what I would serve, I think almost everyone would say I would serve burgers or some sort of steak situation. But my answer is not going to be that, because I feel like spreads need to have that spectacle quality, but it also needs to have an approachable quality. I think that's why cheese and charcuterie happens a lot, because you can really beautify it. It's sort of meant to be finger foody. But sometimes they're a little complicated. Like you need utensils and and then you need a plate, but then you're kind of holding a drink. So I'm always just thinking like several steps ahead about everyone's comfort, and like people need a free hand to shake hands with somebody else or whatever. Yep. So what I'm imagining is like mega seafood tower platter kind of things. So it's like you pop that oyster, you drop it in the bucket, or like you shrimp and dips, like just like yummy dips. But I have learned that I love seafood towers.
Yeah.
And like things like that. Or just like the uni panna cotta can totally be there, because it's just like little cups of it, little baby spoons. And then I think for the full spread, same thing. Unless it's a dinner party with like table seatings and fork and knife, but for whatever reason, the way I'm imagining it, well, actually, maybe
it's your party. It's your party.
It's my party.
It's your party.
I think I need lots of fried chicken. So I think it's just like really beautiful fried chicken, like cooked greens, mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, but also yummy sauces with your fried chicken, and yummy hot sauces, champagne.
Do you know when I turned, this is sort of maybe something I shouldn't reveal on a work podcast, but when I turned 50, 2 years ago in August, my 50th birthday resolution was to drink more champagne.
Yes, you
Not
should.
more Prosecco, not more Cava, champagne. And for me, it's like, I don't need many glasses, but I love one beautiful celebratory glass. And just that idea of a seafood tower, which I love. Both of my girls really love fresh seafood. So I'm also like remembering the story of the picture of your parents with the water in the background and the boat. There's like deep legacy too of living on and near the water, and what you take from the water that like now feeds this community table that you have built many times. You will build again, I have no doubt, in whatever way your future sort of holds for you. So I love that. I want to come to that dream dinner party.
I have this really core memory of maybe being 4 or 5 years old, and I'm at somebody's home in Hong Kong, and it's like there's a matriarch, my mom, and myself, and it's just the three of us, and for hours we sat at that table and peeled shrimp and ate it. And for a while, I actually couldn't eat shrimp because of this core memory.
Too much.
Because we must have had 1,000.
Wow.
And but now, like, I really cherish it. And here in America, my favorite city to travel to is New Orleans. And I love like seafood boils. My former chef and business partner, he loved doing seafood boils, and it was like our thing that we did with like our staff, which we just dump it on the newspaper and just like
I love it.
So much seafood, and he said I was such a champ as far as like getting crab out of crab claws and stuff, but it was because I was an only child, and I would be at these like huge Chinese banquet dinners and alone, so I just sat there with my crab, and I became very good at it.
Very good at picking out. When I learned of Jonathan's death, I was in Tokyo, Japan with my brother. I was on a work trip, and I had just the idea that I would invite my brother. He's a couple years older than I am. His wife is a traveler, but wasn't interested in Japan for whatever reasons. My husband stayed home with my daughters, and me and my brother went, and he loves food, seafood, sushi, any of it. And so it's just interesting to hear that. I, of course, never knew Jonathan, but when I heard that news and my heart went out to you from across all the miles, I'm just now reflecting that in many ways, what Todd and I did during those days was really honoring so much of what you and Jonathan had built together. And we didn't even know it. Just really celebrating that shared sense of exploration. They would always try to give us the English menu, the English menus. And I was like, no. So we would get our little like Google camera translate. And I was like, give me the Japanese menu, because I want to order all of the crazy stuff that like maybe no other American tourist wants to order. But all of our Japanese like partners are eating it with cold beer after work. And we tried and explored more things in those few days. It was just such an incredible experience. It was awesome.
Wow. It sounds glorious. Thank you for sharing that and relating to Jonathan.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. This was like such a beautiful conversation. I want to just, link back to the not really strangers, which we've explored in so many interesting and creative ways. I also want to honor our connection I just want the listeners to know, we have no reason why we should be on this phone call together, why we would be friends, why I would have eaten in your restaurant, except that you were putting beautiful stuff out into the world, like emotion and text and prose and pictures of connection, people that I don't know, beautiful, good-looking people in LA. And I was like, I want to be closer to this. I want to know who this human is who is making me feel such a sense of belonging from my home on the East Coast in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And so I feel like everything about what we've just done is just honoring this sort of notion of inclusion and belonging and connection, and that no one is really a stranger. So thank you so much for taking this time with us today.
Thank you. This has been such a delight and one of my favorite conversations I've ever had. So I appreciate you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. Your time is valuable, and it means a lot that you've chosen to spend it here. You can find today's show notes, including how to connect with today's guest, at unrefugees.org/notreallystrangers. That's unrefugees.org/notreallystrangers. While you're there, I hope you'll consider making a donation to the organization I lead, USA for UNHCR, to help us provide more support for refugees here in the US and around the world. If this episode was impactful, please take a moment to review the show and share the episode with a friend or family member. This small action will help us have a much bigger impact. Thanks so much. Don't be a stranger.